It all began on a bitterly cold winter night. The wind howled outside my window, the trees scraping their skeletal branches against the glass, as if seeking shelter from the malevolent forces lurking beyond. I huddled beneath my blankets, the feeble warmth of my bedroom providing little solace against the icy fingers of fear that clawed at my spine. Little did I know that this night would mark the beginning of an ordeal that would haunt me for the rest of my days. My name is Emily, and I was living alone in a small centuries-old cottage nestled deep within a dense forest. The nearest town was miles away, and the isolation was precisely what I had sought when I moved here. I was a writer, you see, and I yearned for the tranquility of nature to fuel my creativity. Yet, that night, I would learn that nature held secrets far more sinister than any story I could conjure. As the clock ticked away, I found myself unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was a sensation that crept into my consciousness, like a shadow, gradually becoming more pronounced until it consumed my thoughts entirely. I glanced around the room, half expecting to find a pair of malevolent eyes leering at me from the darkness. But there was nothing there, just the ordinary furnishings of my quaint little cottage. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination. After all, the forest outside my window was teeming with nocturnal creatures, and their rustlings could easily have played tricks on my mind. I tried to focus on my writing, hoping to lose myself in the world of words I was creating. But the sense of unease persisted, a nagging presence at the edge of my consciousness. Around midnight, I decided to make myself a cup of tea, hoping that the warmth and caffeine would dispel my irrational fears. I lit a few candles and ventured into the kitchen. As I waited for the kettle to boil, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible creaking sound. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I saw it. A figure, tall and gaunt, stood in the doorway leading to the living room. It was cloaked in darkness, but I could make out the silhouette of a person, or at least something that resembled one. What chilled me to the bone, however, was the absence of a face. The head was smooth and featureless, like a blank canvas, and yet it seemed to radiate malevolence. I stumbled backward, my teacup crashing to the floor, shattering into pieces. The figure remained motionless, and for a moment I questioned my sanity. Was this a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion? But when I blinked and rubbed my eyes, the figure was still there, its form undeniably real. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to glide towards me, moving with a grace that defied the laws of nature. Panic surged through my veins, and I turned and fled through the kitchen door into the frigid night. I stumbled through the forest, the biting cold gnawing at my skin. My breath misted in front of me as I ran, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, eager to ensnare me. I could hear the wind whispering, its voice filled with malicious intent. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from that faceless entity. My cottage, my sanctuary, was now a place of unspeakable horror. I couldn't go back there, not as long as that thing remained. Hours passed, and exhaustion finally overcame me. I collapsed in a small clearing, the cold ground seeping through my clothes, but I dared not sleep, for fear that the faceless visitor would find me once more. I huddled against a tree, my eyes darting around the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. As the first faint light of dawn began to filter through the trees, I mustered the courage to rise to my feet. My limbs ached, and I was shivering uncontrollably. But I knew I had to find help. I stumbled deeper into the forest, hoping to eventually reach the nearest town. It felt like an eternity had passed when I finally emerged from the woods and onto a desolate road. I mustered what little strength I had left and began to walk, hoping to flag down a passing car. But the road seemed to stretch on endlessly, and there was no sign of civilization in sight. Just when despair threatened to engulf me entirely, a car appeared on the horizon. I waved my arms frantically, my voice hoarse from screaming. The car slowed, and a kind-hearted couple offered me a ride to the nearest town. I must have looked like a madwoman, with my disheveled hair and wild eyes, but they didn't ask questions. In the safety of their car, I finally allowed myself to relax, to let the tears flow. I recounted the night's events to the couple, leaving out nothing, not even the faceless visitor. They exchanged worried glances, but said little, as if afraid that speaking too much of it might summon the very horror I sought to escape. They dropped me off at the local police station, where I was met with skepticism and disbelief. The officers questioned me extensively, their eyes filled with doubt, but I could tell that beneath their skepticism there was a trace of fear, a nagging doubt that maybe, just maybe, there was something to my story. Days turned into weeks as the investigation into my ordeal continued. The police combed the forest, searching for any trace of the faceless visitor, but they found nothing. I tried to move on with my life, to put the horrors of that night behind me, but the fear lingered like a stubborn stain, refusing to fade. Then one evening, as I sat in my new apartment in a bustling city far from the forest, I received a call from one of the officers who had interviewed me. His voice was hushed, filled with trepidation. "We found something," he said. "Something in the woods." My heart skipped a beat as he described a strange, ancient altar hidden deep within the forest, covered in strange symbols and surrounded by decaying animal remains. It was a place of darkness, a place that radiated an otherworldly malevolence. And at the center of the altar, they found a photograph. The photograph was old, its edges yellowed with age. But what sent chills down my spine was the image it held. It was a picture of my cottage, surrounded by the dense forest, and standing in front of the cottage was the faceless visitor, its smooth, featureless head turned towards the camera, as if it had known it was being watched. The officer's voice shook as he spoke. "We've been trying to identify the person in the photograph, but there's no record of anyone living in that cottage for decades before you moved there. We don't know who or what that thing is, but it's been there, lurking in the darkness, for longer than anyone can remember." I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. The faceless visitor, whatever it was, had been a part of that forest for generations, perhaps centuries. It had watched over my cottage long before I had ever set foot there, and it had chosen that fateful night to reveal itself to me. I knew then that I could never truly escape it, that its malevolent presence would forever haunt my nightmares. The isolation of the forest had drawn me in, but it had also brought me face to face with a horror beyond imagination. As I sit here now, in the safety of my city apartment, I can't help but glance nervously at the window, half expecting to see the faceless visitor lurking in the shadows. The rational part of me tells me that it's impossible, that I'm safe here in the heart of civilization. But deep down, I know that some horrors can never be truly escaped, that they linger in the darkest corners of our minds, waiting for the moment when they can once again step out of the shadows and into our lives.